I'm the girl who talks a lot. I'm the girl who always has her head in the clouds. I'm the girl that tries to find the humor in every situation. I'm the girl who's too much. Hi, I'm Sam Richardson, and this is my podcast, Living Richardson.
Thank you so much for all the positive reviews and feedbacks surrounding my first episode. I seriously cried when I read what you guys had to say about it. The only critique you had to offer was that it was too short. Apparently, you guys like to listen to me drag on. So today, we're gonna dive in to my love life. I feel like you can learn a lot about a person when you understand their dating history. In my experience, certain relationships were a vital learning experience and pushed me into being who I am today. So while a lot of them were messy, I don't necessarily regret them because they forced me to learn about myself and figure out who it was that I wanted to be. Like many stories that precede mine, this one starts with some good old-fashioned daddy issues. Like I mentioned before, my parents were both 20 years old when they met at a bar through mutual friends. My dad's sister had just passed away in a car accident that week, and his friends were just looking to get him out of the house and score some punani. My mom does not have a great track record with relationships. She becomes pretty attached the moment she likes someone. So my parents had a 2-week love affair, and then my father was ready to move on. At the time, my dad was healing from a recent breakup with a woman whom he shared a 9-month-old son with, my older brother. After ending their quick love affair, my mother found out she was pregnant. When she told my dad, he of course denied it. There was no way he was ready to take care of another child. So he ran around town telling everyone that the night my mom got pregnant, she participated in an orgy, so she had no clue who the father was. Even though it was pretty clear that her baby would not have a father, my mother decided to continue on with her pregnancy. And in November of 1989, after an excruciating 22 hours of labor, my mother gave birth to me, her one and only daughter. My mom had always loved the name Anastasia for a girl, and she wanted to nickname her Stasia, so that was her plan for my name. Originally, I was supposed to be Anastasia Shamrock, Stasia Shamrock for short. But once I was born, my grandmother told my mom that sounded like a stripper name, and she would not allow her to name me that. So then my mother had a brilliant idea. She would name her new baby girl after the man who didn't want her. Yes, my father's name is Sam. My name is Samantha. But the real kicker? Remember that 9-month-old son I told you he has? My older brother? He's also named after our dad. So my dad's name is Sam, my brother's name is Sam, and my name is Sam. But to make it even more juicy, none of us shared the same last name. Both my brother and I were given our mother's last names. Anyone else out there share a first name but not a last name with their immediate family members? Not only did I share a name with a man who did not want me, I also looked exactly like him. And of course my mom made sure to remind me of that constantly growing up. Oh my gosh, when you make that face, you look just like your dad, Sam Jr. Well, Mom, if you don't want to be constantly reminded of someone, don't have a baby with them. I absolutely hated that. Stop comparing me to somebody who wants nothing to do with me. I did eventually start seeing my dad when I was 4 years old. My brother and I would go over there every other weekend growing up to visit with him, and he would take us out. I mean, when we were there, it wasn't a bad time. He would rent movies and make us some fun food, but that was the extent of my relationship with my father. Things were fun every other weekend that I saw him, and then he was pretty much non-existent. He would take us out around town and show us off to his friends. These are my bastard children. I'm Sam, this is Sammy, this is Samantha. Like the damn white trash Three Amigos. I also have a younger sister from my dad. I honestly can't remember if she's 2 or 3 years younger than me. I think 3 years. The relationship with my father and my younger sister's mother is pretty interesting. So they were high school sweethearts, broke up. He met my brother's mom, had my brother, met my mom, had me, and then 3 years later, rekindled the high school flame with my little sister's mom. And then, you guessed it, got her pregnant too. During her pregnancy, however, she and my father broke up. she met someone new and married him, and he adopted my little sister. For 20 years, I knew I had a sister out there, but I had never met her. Coincidentally, we are both involved in the theater industry, and our paths crossed when I was 20 and she was 17. Her mother had just been recently divorced from her adoptive father and was single. My father did want my little sister. He fought to stay with her mom, but I was told as she picked the man with money. My mother actually helped my dad in a custody battle win visitation rights to see my little sister, but anytime he tried to go see her, she wouldn't be home, and eventually her stepfather was able to adopt her without my father's consent. Go ahead, guess what happened next? My father and my little sister's mother began dating again. The only real relationships my father has ever had was with my brother's mom and my little sister's mom. That was another thing that was hard for me growing up, was knowing that he wanted my brother and my little sister, but didn't want me. Even though the three of us were all accidents, if you will, I was the only one he felt it was okay to truly abandon. It's sad to say that I never had a good relationship with my brother and sister, and I still don't. And as of today, it has been a little over a year since I've last spoken to my dad. And I've accepted the probability that I never will again. Now, we're going to move on to my mom. As I said in the beginning of this episode, my mom does not have a good track record with men. She was a single mom at the age of 21 and was looking for a father for her baby. The 4 years between my birth and my mother meeting my stepdad, my mother had 2 significant relationships and was actually engaged to one. When I was 4 years old, my mom and I moved into a duplex. Living on the other side of the duplex was an unmarried couple and their 2 children who were my age. Eventually, the couple broke up and the mom moved out. My mom started dating their dad. They got pregnant with my first little brother and then got married when I was 7. It was not a faithful marriage on my stepfather's part. They were separated when I was 10, ended up getting pregnant with my youngest brother during their separation, got back together, and then finally got divorced when my brother was 1. I was 13 years old. Since her divorce, my mom has had a slew of relationships, but currently she is also single. I truly believe that my mom's self-worth depends on a man. And unfortunately, that's what I learned as well. The only real relationship I had modeled for me growing up was that of my grandparents. My grandmother, good old Marlene, is very much eccentric like myself, and she is married to my calm and reserved grandfather, Paul. This is a true case of when opposites attract, and while their relationship has not always been easy, without a doubt, the love is there. We almost lost my grandmother this past year to COVID, and I will never forget watching my grandfather love her while she was sick. He showed up every single day to sit with her for hours. The one time when I went to visit her, it was just my grandfather and I in the room with her, and she was completely out. He made some promises to her and told me I was his witness and had to hold him accountable. He promised that if she survived, he would take her to the casino and she could gamble anything she wanted. He would take her out on a big clothing shopping spree, but she had to buy clothes that actually fit her. My grandmother has a habit of buying anything she sees that she likes, hoping one day it will fit her. And the last thing he promised was that he was going to take her skinny dipping in Hawaii. Even though it wasn't perfect, that was the love I wanted. They may be so opposite from each other, but they are truly each other's person. Their love is unconditional. I'm not gonna lie, I was extremely boy crazy growing up, but I feel like that's completely normal. Even though my family made me feel like there was something wrong with me by asking me who my flavor of the week was whenever I had a new crush. So it's safe to say I have had my fill of relationships, but I'm gonna tell you about the ones that were life-changing for me. I will never forget my first love. I was 7 years old, and we were staying in a hotel in a different state for a dance competition. One night, my mom took us down to the swimming pool, and there I met this 7-year-old boy named Joe. I don't remember anything else about Joe other than he was the first love of my life. I am not kidding you. So I met this 7-year-old boy at a hotel swimming pool and played with him in the pool all night. And then the next day we both went home. I can remember once we got home, laying on my mother's bed, bawling my eyes out because I missed Joe and I wanted to marry him. To this day, I still remember his shiny black hair and his shark swim trunks. Joe, if you're listening, I have 2 questions. Was I your first love too? And do you still wear shark swim trunks? That brings us to my first real boyfriend. This is the big one, guys. This was the true first real boyfriend. Alex.
I've been a dancer since I was 3 years old. In the summer of 2004, when I was 14 years old, I danced with a girl named Erica. We were all on vacation in Ocean City, Maryland for a dance competition. A bunch of us were outside playing volleyball when this boy walked over. I swear he walked straight out of a page of 17 magazine, complete with blonde highlights, a Hollister polo, and a puka shell necklace. Alex was the perfect vision of what I always wanted my teenage boyfriend to look like. I found out that he was 17, and I thought there is no way he is going to be interested in a silly little girl. But somehow, I caught his eye. But then he never asked me for his number. But I definitely had an in since I would continue dancing with his sister. His sister told me her brother wanted my phone number. He called me, took me out on our first date, and gave me what I think is one of the cutest first kisses of all time. Second to Kyle, of course. Which reminds me, babe, if you're listening, go ahead and skip this part. For our first date, Alex took me to the movies to see Without a Paddle. When the movie had ended, we walked out of the movie theater in a torrential downpour. We ran as fast as we could to the back of the parking lot where his car was parked. Once we got inside and caught our breath, all the windows fogged up. Soaking wet, Alex leaned over and wrote "Hi" in the fog on the windshield. I sat there and just giggled because I'm awkward and what the hell was I supposed to do? So I turned my head and smiled at him. And he said, "Well, aren't you gonna write it back?" And when I leaned over to write the word "hi," he kissed me. With all the pubescent hormones flying around, we fell for each other hard, fast. I was convinced I was going to marry this boy, so it should come as no surprise that he's the one I lost my virginity to. Do you remember the date you lost your virginity? I do. September 25th, 2004. If you're a teenager listening to this, learn from my mistakes. I was way too young. Now comes the time for me to tell all of you lovely strangers how I lost my virginity. I gotta tell this story because I am genuinely curious to see if anybody else can relate to my story with their first time. I lost my virginity the day they found my best friend's body. Antoinette will get her own episode because she so deserves it. But for now, all you need to know is that the day before she turned 16, she got in a fight with her mom, walked outside, and jumped off a bridge over a river, even though she couldn't swim. Her body was found 5 days later. On the day they found her body, before I knew they did, I was still trying to accept the fact that my friend was probably gone. So Alex took me out for the day, and our plan was to head back to my house and watch a movie. When we got back to my house, my mom told me that she received a phone call from my other friend's mom and that they had found Antoinette's body. Obviously, I was distraught, so Alex and I went upstairs and decided to still watch a movie and get my mind off things. That's when some heavy petting started and began to lead to other things. Mine and Alex's relationship lasted for a year and a half. He ended up going to college while I was a junior in high school, and there's nothing really else I can say other than we were young and it was just a first time love that, like most first time loves, just doesn't work out. After my breakup with Alex, I had a couple little flings, but my next life-changing relationship was Andy. Andy and I went to high school together, and he had pretty much had a crush on me all throughout high school, but it wasn't until the very end of our senior year that we started dating. I was definitely the teacher's pet, goody two-shoes type of girl. And Andy was more of a rebel, if you will. Went to parties and smoked pot and all that fun stuff. Which leads me to what happened the day I graduated from high school. Beginning of June 2007, I was 17 years old, and I was on my way to my first ever high school party. I had just started dating Andy, and of course, he was heading out with a bunch of friends to a big graduation party for our class. A few friends, Andy and I, were in the car, and we decided to stop at another friend's house, and we could all caravan over together. Now, this friend lived in a cul-de-sac, and as we all were outside talking before leaving, as teenagers do, two of the guys that were with us took MMA classes together, and they began playfully sparring in the middle of the street. Of course, a woman watching from her window called the cops. Before we know it, 4 police cars come flying up the road and enclose us in this cul-de-sac. They jump out of their car, guns raised, and I immediately flip out. But like quietly flip out. I stood there and went quiet and numb. The one officer was a complete asshole, and I think it brought him pure joy to fuck with a bunch of teenagers who just graduated high school. What I remember is they had all of us lined up. They searched the yard next to where all the cars were parked, and they claimed to have found a switchblade knife. I don't know if this was true or not, but one of the guys that was with us stepped up and said that was his knife, and said he would go downtown quietly and protect the rest of us. The police cuffed him and put him in the car, and at this time is when they told us they had probable cause and were allowed to legally search Andy's car. When they searched his car, they found a big CD binder. Who remembers those? Come on, millennials. The big, giant binders full of CDs that you would just throw around your backseat of your car. You guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, they found Andy's CD case. They unzipped it and opened it, and he had a baggie of pot. I don't know how much pot. I was completely oblivious to that type of stuff back then, and all I can say, it was just a small little bag of pot. But of course, they put handcuffs on Andy and pulled him away in the car. Then they asked who were the 2 boys fighting, and even though they were playfully sparring and nobody was actually causing any harm, they handcuffed those 2 and put them in the car. Now, 4 of our friends were handcuffed, and there were 2 of us left standing there. 17-year-old me and another 17-year-old girl, also named Samantha. The cop walks over to us, and he says, "Okay, let's hear it. What am I going to arrest the 2 of you for?" I immediately said, "Officer, we have not done anything wrong. Please just let us go home." So he looks at me and he says, "How old are you? What's your name?" I said, "I'm 17. My name is Samantha." He looks at my friend. He says, "How old are you? What's your name?" She says, "I'm 17. My name is Samantha." Of course, this cop thought we were playing a joke on him. So he gets all mad and starts yelling at us. We pull our IDs out and we hand it to him. Upon confirming that we both were in fact 17 and named Samantha, he decided that we were out past curfew for being 17 years old and it was past 10 o'clock at night. We did not get cuffed, but the 2 of us were put into a police car together. The cop car we were placed in was the first to leave the scene and head to the police station. I immediately recognized the officer of the car we were placed in. He was Officer Smith, and he had actually been a patrolman at our school. He was an easy, nice going guy. I held it together, but was very scared. And on the way to the police station, I asked Officer Smith what I was being charged with and how much trouble I was in. And he laughed and said, "Don't worry about that guy back there. You 2 aren't in any trouble, but because you're 17, I gotta take you to the station and call your parents. Your friends, on the other hand, especially the one that had a knife and pot, they're gonna be looking at some charges." I don't remember what all the charges were, but I do remember Andy did get some kind of paraphernalia charge, which ended up just, I don't remember if it was wiped off or he just had a slap on the wrist, but nothing ever really came from it. But once we were done at the station, we were allowed to go home. However, since I was only 17, a guardian had to come pick me up. My mother was not answering her phone. So, I thought of the only other person I could call. You guessed it, Marlene. Now, this is one of my favorite grandma stories. Let me describe Marlene for you first. She's about 5'1" and very round. She has burgundy, frizzy hair, and she dresses in tight, bedazzled clothing. Some of her ensembles have even known to be seen through. Now Marlene, clad in black bedazzled spandex leggings, hobbles into the police station on her cane. "Where's my granddaughter?" "Right here she is, ma'am." "Well, what are you charging her with? My granddaughter has not done anything wrong." I don't know why I'm going into a Southern accent because my grandmother is not Southern, but for some reason it just feels like it fits right now. "Where is my granddaughter? She has done nothing wrong." And I calmed her down. I was like, "Grandma, I'm allowed to go." And then she sees Andy. She says, "Well, are all my granddaughter's friends free to go too?" And he says, "Yes, they are." And she points her finger and she says, "And you better think twice before charging any of these kids because they are really good kids and you just are crossing a line." After she yelled at the police, she took all 6 of us in her giant red van. Before we made it back to our cars, my grandmother stopped at the gas station, handed me a $20 bill and said, "Go inside and get your friends anything they want. You guys have had a rough night." So we get back in the car after getting our snacks and she says, "I don't live too far from here. Do any of you want to come over and I'll put on a pot of coffee?" At this point, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning and we were all just ready to go to bed. So we kindly declined and my grandmother gave us all a ride back to our cars. And that was the end of that night for me. There was nothing really wrong with mine and Andy's relationship other than just another example of being too young and wanting to experience other people. We broke up, and I met Tim. Tim was truly a person that was placed in my life at the perfect time, because if it wasn't for him, I don't think I would have made it through the most traumatic experience of my life. Tim was 21 and I was 18 when we met. A few weeks after we had started dating, I found out I was pregnant. But the kicker was, Tim and I had not had sex yet, meaning I was 3 months pregnant with Andy's baby. Tim held my hand while I read the positive pregnancy test and held me while I cried and told him he could leave, and he didn't. He was there at every ultrasound. He was there every single day she was in the hospital, and he was there holding my hand the day she died. Tim Wolf is one of the most sweetest men you will ever meet, and he is downright hilarious. He definitely has his own special taste of humor, specializing in dark comedy. He actually does a few stand-up things. You can follow him at Tim Wolf Comedy on Twitter or TikTok. Tim and I were together for 2 years, and he was the first guy I ever lived with. The first year of our relationship was me being pregnant with another man's baby and her passing away. The second year of our relationship, I lived in survival mode again. I had just lost my daughter and I didn't know what to do with my life. And Tim was always there, always supported me, but ultimately, I don't think we were made for each other. I truly believe Tim was placed in my life because I needed him then. And I don't know why I was placed in Tim's life, but I can only hope that his life was made better for it too. I spoke to Tim prior to making this episode, and I got his permission to tell you one of my favorite funny stories about him. When I was about 6 months pregnant with Cadence, a relative of mine down in Georgia was having a wedding. So my family took a little road trip for the weekend, and Tim came along with us. My family is very competitive and likes to fool around. My uncle lives literally on the side of a mountain. Some of my uncles and cousins decided it would be fun to race each other down the side of the mountain and back up. Each person on their own and would be timed, and whoever had the fastest time was the winner. I'm sorry to say, Tim is not a very athletic person, but he stepped up and he ran down that fucking mountain. Well, he ran down it for about 30 seconds until he tripped. So Tim tumbled his ass down that mountain and he was stopped by a briar bush. But man, did he get right back up and charge as fast as he could right back up that mountain. As soon as he got close enough for me to see, I realized he had scratches all over his body and there was blood everywhere. And of course, I tended to his wounds. But I will never, ever forget watching my sweet boyfriend fall down the side of the mountain, and there was nothing I could do to help because I was 6 months pregnant and I would have been tumbling down right behind him. Tim, if you're listening, I hope your nipples have healed nicely from that incident, and I sincerely wish you the very best. I definitely blame myself for how my relationship with Tim ended, but also I wasn't really myself at that time. So as I mentioned, I'm a dancer. Following high school, I had auditioned for the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, also known as AMDA, in New York City. I was accepted, but shortly later I found out I was pregnant with Cadence. Following her death, I decided to re-audition and try to start my life over again. In August of 2010, my mom, Tim, and I drove to New York City so I could audition once more. At this point in our relationship, Tim and I had kind of started to pull away from each other. The relationship had definitely gone from being romantic into more of a friendship, and I still loved Tim with all of my heart, but I truly knew that I needed something more with my life. I needed out. While I was back in the audition, this guy sat next to me. He could sing, he could dance, he was extremely attractive, and he was going to be going to New York City too. I saw my way out in him. We exchanged phone numbers and began a texting relationship. Tim knew about it, but of course was not happy, and we began to fight a lot. And one night, we ended things. Feeling like my life had completely crumbled beneath me, I took off in the middle of the night for Connecticut to visit the boy I had met at the auditions in New York City, Anthony. My relationship with Anthony will get its own episode because there are just so many stories and so many situations that happened in such a short period of time with him. For now, what you need to know is that a month after I ran away to Connecticut, I found out I was pregnant with Anthony's baby. Of course, this put my dreams of going back to New York City on hold, as well as his. He was not happy at first and told me to get an abortion. But after going through what I just went through with Cadence, there was no way I was going to give this baby up, even if that meant he didn't want to be part of it. He decided he loved me and he was going to love our baby and we were going to be together. Oh, this topic is a heavy one for me, and that's why I'm saving this for an entirely different episode, because that's not where I want to go with this one. But when Evangeline was 5 months old, we were living in Connecticut with Anthony's parents. Anthony and I got into one of our many fights, but this was the first time things became physical, and I was a victim of domestic violence. Long story short, the court ended up placing a protective order on me so that Anthony could have absolutely no contact with me. And at this time, Evangeline and I went back to Ohio to stay with my mom. I was 22 years old and a single mom with a 5-month-old daughter. I became a state-tested nurse's aide and began working in nursing homes and home health in order to try to provide a better future for my daughter. And at some point, I had planned on nursing school because in my mind, I figured I was going to be going down this path alone. Shortly after getting back home and starting to try to figure out my life again, my mom told me I should make a profile on Plenty of Fish. Is Plenty of Fish even still around? So this was back in 2012, before Bumble, before Hinge, back when it was eHarmony, Christian Mingle, and Plenty of Fish. Now, Plenty of Fish was the free app, so there were a lot of crazy, disturbing people on this app. And I got all kinds of fantastically disgusting messages. One day I was scrolling my Plenty of Fish feed, and this really cute 28-year-old engineer popped up named Kyle. Kyle's profile said that he liked traveling, he liked fishing, camping, he liked spending time with his family, and I liked what I read. So I messaged him and said, "Hey there, looking at your profile, it seems like we have a lot in common." He responded back, "Yeah, like what?" We started texting each other, and one day I was at a client's house for home health, and I realized that my van was leaking oil all over the driveway. I am not a car person. I have no freaking clue what to do. So I texted Kyle, and I said, "Hey, are you any good with cars?" Which, now knowing my husband, that's a stupid question. So he says, "Yeah, can I call you? This conversation would probably be better on the phone." Now, up until this point, Kyle and I had only been texting. And I'm the kind of person, okay, this makes me shallow, but I like what I like. I am the kind of person that I am attracted to a person's voice. So I was very excited but nervous to hear Kyle speak on the phone because I really, really liked him. I had been talking to him nonstop for 2 weeks through text. But I was so scared to hear his voice. So he called me, and I answered. And I remember hearing his voice for the first time, and all he said was, "Hey." And I knew I could live with that voice for the rest of my life. Fun fact, this was also the phone call that I found out what Kyle's last name was, which, of course, is Richardson. And I remember going, Samantha Richardson. That has a nice ring to it. I could vibe with that. And here we are, and my entire life has been created into Living Richardson. Anyway, after talking to Kyle on the phone, we were able to figure out what the heck was going on with my car, and that got all fixed. But I think that was my knight in shining armor moment. That's probably so Midwestern of me. "Oh, I met this man on the internet, and he was able to fix my car for me. It was true love after that, my knight in shining armor." A few days after that, we went on our first date. Kyle refused to take any more women out to dinner because he had been on so many dates, and that's kind of why he responded to me the way he did when I first wrote to him. He was sick of paying for dinner, failed date after failed date. So for our first date, we went and played putt-putt. Now, when we got there, I was trying to be super cute and was like, "We should make a wager. If I win, you owe me a hug." And I thought he would up the antics and say, "Okay, if I win, you gotta give me a kiss." But then that wouldn't be the seductive spreadsheet king that we've all grown to love. So when I said, "If I win, you owe me a hug," Kyle looks and turns at me and says, "If I win, you gotta take me down the street and buy me a root beer float." I suck at putt-putt. So can you guess who won? Fast forward about an hour, Kyle and I are now down the street at the A&W, drinking some root beer floats. Now, he did try to pay for them, but I said, a deal is a deal. You won. I will pay for our root beer floats. And this asshat made a single mom pay for his root beer float. I kid. He was totally going to pay for it, but I put my foot down and said, I stand behind what I say. The entire date was just spent laughing and being totally into each other. And he walked me to my grandpa's truck, which I guess I better tell you this story because if I don't, my grandpa might kick my butt. He likes to claim that if it weren't for him, Kyle and I would not be together. I told you that my van was leaking oil. When I was ready to go on this date with Kyle, my van had not been fixed yet. Kyle had lived an hour away. We had planned to meet halfway, and I needed a vehicle to meet him. So I had to talk to my grandpa, and he let me drive his rusty 1993 little red Chevy pickup truck 30 minutes to meet Kyle. So at the end of our date, Kyle walked me to my grandpa's rusty pickup truck, leaned me against it, and that's how Graham was conceived. I'm kidding. Prior to Kyle, I was told by every guy I had been with that I was either a lot to handle, too much, so dramatic, over the top, too emotional, etc. So, of course, when I met Kyle, I tried really hard to impress him, starting with trying to make his favorite cookies for his birthday, jam thumbprints. My mom does not cook. I grew up on frozen and boxed meals, so I have had to try to teach myself. About a month into our relationship, it was Kyle's birthday, and I thought I'd be cute and make him his favorite cookies. Cookies that I had never heard of before, but I was going to attempt to make these. So if you're not familiar with jam thumbprint cookies, they're usually about the size of like maybe $50, and it's like a shortbread cookie with some kind of jam, jelly, your favorite, baked in the middle. So for his 29th birthday, I was like, hot damn, I'm gonna impress this man and I'm gonna Betty Crocker this shit up. I was not aware of what size these cookies were actually supposed to be. You know, like I said before, about a $50 size. I made these cookies the size of my hand. I was so proud of myself. I was like, these cookies are giant and full of jam. And I will never forget the look on Kyle's face when he opened the container and saw that they were probably 4 times the size they were supposed to be. He laughed and he laughed and said, "Oh my gosh, these cookies are huge." And that's when he pulled up a picture and showed me what they normally look like. I beat myself up for that. I felt like such a failure and I kept apologizing. And Kyle just kept laughing and reassuring me that it was fine and saying, "Why are you apologizing for giving me more of something? Either way, it still tastes the same." Another time shortly after the cookie incident, I was going to make stuffed pepper soup for Kyle. I followed all the directions, everything was going great, but then it didn't specify how much rice to add. I don't even know how much rice I added, but it definitely was not soup anymore, and it was tomato, beef, pepper, flavored rice at this point. Once again, I beat myself up, kept apologizing to Kyle, and he just laughed it off and said, "It still tastes just as good. It's fine." Kyle is the most mentally stable person I have ever met. And while he may not understand my mood swings and panic attacks, he has always been there to support me through them. We've been together for 10 years, and it's been a learning curve, but he's never made me feel like I was too much to him. This man who had never set foot in therapy will often sit in on my sessions so that he can have a better understanding of the way I tick and how to support me when I'm having one of my episodes. They say you marry a man who's like your father, and I find this to be really interesting in my case, because I believe that Evangeline's biological father, Anthony, is very comparable to my father. And then I believe that Kyle is very comparable to my grandfather, Paul, who is married to Marlene, and has been the only decent father figure in my life. I almost made the mistake of marrying someone like my father. But then I realized the type of man I really deserved, and that's who I married. I know that if I were on my deathbed, Kyle too would promise to take me skinny dipping in Hawaii if I survived. Speaking of marriage, here's the story of how Kyle doomed our marriage by wiping away our first kiss as husband and wife. We had a classic wedding theme going on, very lacy, vintage decor, and of course, I wanted to have a bold red lip with my porcelain skin. Kyle, who is always weird about kissing me when I'm wearing lipstick because he doesn't want it on his lips. As I was walking down the aisle, Kyle noticed that I had bright red lipstick on. And once I met him at the end, he turned to me and said, "Is that lipstick gonna get on my lips?" And I was like, "No, babe, this stuff is so cool. It's this like lipstick technology." You girls know what I'm talking about. They have those new lipsticks now, like no budge, stay all day. It was supposed to be one of those lipsticks, right? Well, the lady that did my makeup put that on, but then she put a top coat of this glossy lip gloss. Fair warning, if you put some other lip gloss over a non-budge lipstick, it will budge. So anyway, I'm like, "No, babe, we're good. It's no budge. We're good, we're good." So he's like, "All right, cool, let's do this thing. Let's get married." And Kyle's aunt, who married us, pronounced us as husband and wife, said we could now kiss. We shared a lovely first kiss as husband and wife, and in true marriage fashion, when we pulled apart, what's mine became his. He too was wearing the non-budge red lipstick. And I started cracking up because I was just like, well, shit. And that cued our family and friends to start laughing. And poor Kyle had no idea what was happening until I pointed at his mouth. And that's when Kyle wiped away our very first kiss as husband and wife. So our marriage may not be doomed, but I definitely feel like that's a bad omen, right? Bad omens or not, we've been together for 10 years, married for 6. And even though we've experienced some turbulence, we're stronger than we've ever been. And for the first time in my life, I'm not living in survival mode because he makes me feel safe. He sees me for who I am, and he never tries to dim my light. He may not be able to let go and dance in the rain with me, but he'll stand there getting soaked, watching me have the time of my life. We all know that saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And that's true for women like me. Women who are loud and eccentric, dramatic, emotional, over the top. But life really changes when you realize that, baby, you were never a piece of trash. You were always a bright, shining piece of treasure. So you keep walking through life shining, and one day, the right pirate will come and scoop you up, and they will cherish you for the true treasure you are. Kyle may not understand why I operate the way I do, but he has never dimmed my light. If anything, he's encouraged me to be more of who I am, and to stop apologizing for it. Each of my past relationships, though hard, were key in getting me to where I am today. So I am thankful for the learning experiences. I am thankful to know who I am and what I want, and that I will never settle again. Ooh, well, I hope you enjoyed the exhilarating history of my love life. Thank you so much for the continued feedback on these episodes. Please keep it coming. I want to create a podcast that you want to listen to. So I am completely open to your critiques. Let me know what you want to hear next. For more humor and stories outside of this podcast, follow me on TikTok or Instagram at Living Richardson. And please subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for listening.